Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. And this week on Down to the Wire, joining me again is Capping with Candace. Candace here. Candace, we thought we'd take a swing here at the Kentucky Oaks, kind of do a little bit of a roundtable on all of the contenders, because next week we're pretty much going to get down and dirty with our Kentucky Oaks picks, our Kentucky Derby picks, and then take a look at the Woodford Reserve. But I thought this year the interest in the Oaks is going to be heightened simply because there's not a big favorite. And it looks like there's 14 horses that want to get in the gate, and then there's another 4 or 5 horses that are kind of sitting on the outside that are waiting to get in. So I think it's a good year to really dive into the Oaks so people can start planning and kind of starting to narrow down the contenders and who they may like.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is definitely a more wide open race than people ever expected it to be. And I think it's going to be a great race to kick off your Oaks Derby doubles and your Oaks Woodford Reserve Derby pick 3.
Let's start right away with one of the top contenders, Terra Promessa. She comes into the Oaks with a 4-race winning streak, and really Oaklawn Park, she polished off a couple of nice races this spring.
She absolutely did. I mean, she's been the consistent one of these. She took a lot of money in the fantasy, went up extremely short. I think I just struggle to think of how good she's going to be against this quality of competition, because I thought that in the fantasy, she didn't really settle. She was kind of fighting her jockey quite a bit and was really all out to beat Taxable. So when a horse does so much wrong in a race and still wins, I mean, maybe she's a superstar, but I'm more inclined to think that maybe she's been facing weak horses.
Yeah, and sometimes you get, she had won 4 races in a row. All 4 times she led at the stretch call, but she hasn't led at the second call in the beginning of the race. So I guess I wouldn't necessarily call her a front runner, but she likes to be near the pace.
That she does. And I mean, that's not super surprising given the fact that she does struggle maybe to settle in races, and you want to push her as forward as you possibly can usually.
Lewis Bay, another contender. Now, this horse was interesting. I think she got a lot of grief last year in the Demoiselle. It was a very slow race, but remember the track was slow that day, and I think she kind of proved in her Gazelle, which again wasn't another fast race. Either she's the master of the slow races, or maybe just circumstances has kind of worked against her. I mean, visually she looks kind of good. She made a wide sweeping move in the Demoiselle, and then in the Gazelle she came from a little bit off the pace. Now, granted, again, we don't know about the competition, but I think you can say that about all 14 horses. So I guess I don't want to get into the who did they beat argument.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the Oaks, it's a little bit more wide open as far as who did they beat goes. You don't have as much crossover as you do in the Derby to give you kind of a guide to those form lines. So they're much more difficult to compare. And, for her, it's kind of the same as we'll probably end up saying for all of them. Like, is she good enough? I don't know. But as you say, she looked well in her races. And I think she's one of very few in here that there's no concern at all about the distance.
Have you seen any cues visually just from watching her races, or do you think she's kind of definitely one of the 5 or 6, 7 contenders?
I think she's definitely one of the contenders in here, just visually. And it's like I say, knowing that the trip is not a concern. I'm willing to forgive that first race of the season. I think she needed a run.
Well, over a couple of months, Landover Sea managed to run 3 times, second to Songbird, and kind of became that she was a little bit of a punching bag for Songbird. But then she stepped out and drew off by 4 lengths down at the Fairgrounds Oaks. Landover Sea seems to have a good running style, and everybody thought Songbird was good. I guess that it doesn't hurt her that she came out of those races and then went and won by 4 lengths at the Fairgrounds.
It certainly doesn't hurt her, and I think that to take a California horse who they're known for their speed and to have one of them win at the Fairgrounds says a lot, because you have that long stretch run there. She's one that I think she's a more tractable filly we've seen now than she was when we saw her running against Songbird. Songbird kind of takes horses out of their comfort zone because you feel like you have to go with her, otherwise you have no chance. And that's what Landover Sea was doing. Really she was being ridden hard out of the gate to go right up there with Songbird, and then they'd sit, which is maybe the worst tactical decision you could ever make about Songbird. Either go or lay back. You're going to get just fried sitting up next to her. And she still was able to, run well and get second against her several times. I like this filly a lot, and I think that she really should be the favorite in this race, even though she won't be.
Down to the wire, taking a look at the Kentucky Oaks contenders, capping with Candace joining us. And Weep No More. Now, this horse has won 3 in a row. And we saw last year, some of that Tampa Bay form holds up. Kind of a strange pace dynamic the last time. You had the 2 horses just slugging it out. And then here comes Weep No More. But I think she's kind of proven again. I mean, again, it's the old who did they beat. But, I mean, she's been awfully consistent, and her speed figures put her kind of in the hunt.
They do. I mean, I think it depends on how you view that last race. I mean, they didn't go as fast out front as people were giving credit for sure. But I think there's a few things. One, I think there's every chance that there was a fairly decent bias that day, and just nobody's really talking about it because the big race today, the Bluegrass people expected it to collapse. But I think there could have been a closing bias that day. I also think, a Daughter of Mine shaft over a downgraded surface is never going to be a bad thing. So I certainly think that helped her case as well. When I finally finished being like, whoa, what just happened here in the Ashland, I don't know. I think I'm just left with more questions than answers about her because as visually impressive as she looked in there, it was one of those where it's almost too good. It's like everybody else had to have stopped.
Well, the one thing is George Arnold is a very respected horseman. He doesn't have a large stable, so he's never going to be near the leading trainers, but he trains good horses. It's got a nice pedigree, mine shaft out of a Stormcat mare. I think you kind of just have to evaluate her on either potential or watch her races. And I guess I wouldn't X her off. I don't know if she's one of my top 2 contenders, but I think you have to really find reasons to poke holes in her form, and I guess I'm not willing to do that yet.
Yeah, no, it's kind of similar. Like, I don't think, for me, it's like, I don't think I take her that seriously to be like my top choice or my top 2 choices. But if she won, I wouldn't be shocked. It's just more of like, I might have to have her prove it to me one more time. I think if you like her, you have to like what she did against Tampa specifically or extremely well, because the Ashland, it's almost one of those where it looked too good to be true, and there's too many circumstances in there. The track, the conditions as far as the surface goes, and the way that the race played out up front in her favor for me to think, oh, that was a phenomenal performance. She ran really well, but I think to an extent she had a lot going her way as well.
Now, Go Make It Go. I think this is a horse that is going to divide some people as they start to handicap. It was very impressive in her maiden win, and then she stepped right up into a grade 2. But I think everybody kind of knew that off the tracks, even though she was 3 to 5 that day, wasn't that great. Mm-hmm. So did off the tracks just kind of completely stumble? Was it the track? And then, can Go Make It Go kind of step up again? I mean, good trainer, good breeding. I think she's a tough call in a race like this.
I think she's one that, I definitely would be using in here. I was with you, like, off the tracks. I didn't think that horse was anything amazing. And, I don't think, it didn't seem like anybody on Twitter did either. So, definitely word was kind of out on that one with being a bit of a false favorite in there. As you say, comes in here for a good trainer in Dale Romans, very well bred. She's lightly raced, which are types I tend to like because they're unexposed and we don't know how good she is. And at a double-digit price, I'm willing to find out.
2 races ago, Venus Valentine shocked the world at the fairgrounds, 74 to 1. Clockers say that she's training well. Last race, everybody kind of blew off that long shot win. She only lost by 10 lengths, though. She was 13 to 1. I guess I'm kind of putting her in the pile where I don't know what I guess I'm not going to play her, but I think you could say that a bulky field and a pace to run at, maybe she could do a little better than I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think like her and Weep No More, if you see a collapse, then you certainly are trying to look in those fillies' way. I don't really see that happening, so it puts me off of her. When she won in the Rachel Alexandra, obviously she got everything. I mean, she got an absolute pace meltdown. She would need similar to be competitive here, and I just don't see that scenario happening.
Meanwhile, we got Mo Cat shipping in from the West Coast. she lost to Songbird a couple races in a row, but Songbird's not in this race, and I think we saw Landover C lost to Songbird by 6-7 lengths. Mocat has the right running style. This one has a little bit more of a sprinter type pedigree. Premiership was a long-time Florida sire that sired a lot of sprint winners, but she seems to be improving, and I think you kind of, how you handicap her is kind of how you handicap some of that West Coast form. Hard to get a gauge on that Santa Anita Oaks, though, because that race was running the slop, and that track was just sloppy that day.
Yeah, it was. The track being off like that makes it much more difficult to analyze. For Mocat, part of me really likes her, and I think, I liked that she was kind of closing in down the lane, even if Somber was being, eased down a little. She, for her to show some late interest was nice there. I like what she's done out on the West Coast. I guess my concern, I don't know what you think about this, is I wonder, it seems like we see it every year, and I wonder if this is that filly that, they stretched her out, and then at the end of the day, she'll end up being a pretty nice filly, but at 7.
Yeah, you kind of got to go where the money and where the races are in the spring, and then you kind of, the trainers will flat out say, like, well, once that, dream trip is over, then you got to go back to find out really what she's best at. And like I say, the pedigree says a little bit sprint. The other thing is, I thought she was ridden to get second the last time. Like, I thought that was one of the better rides of the meet. She, the jockey sat back, let those 2 cheaper horses chase Songbird in the slop, and then she just loped along and got. I mean, I just thought it was a good ride, and sometimes the plan comes together. And I thought she was ridden to run second, and that's what she did.
Oh no, I certainly agree there. I thought that was, a very nice ride on her, but. Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely things to like. I wouldn't put anyone off if you're playing a try or a super and having a horse like her, and on kind of your second and third lines. I think that she has a case to that point. But yeah, I mean, she's the one who jumps off the page to me, though, as being one who's kind of around in these races, kind of stays on, but maybe pretty one pace, and then they'll cut her back to 7 furlongs, and it'll be kind of like what you've seen with Forever Unbridled. Maybe she's not as good as Forever Unbridled, but Forever Unbridled was one who people kept saying she needs more ground, she needs more ground, she needs more ground. You come back to 7, she's a monster. I think Mocat's going to, to a lesser extent, is going to have a similar career path.
All right, well, book her a ticket to the test stakes then at Saratoga.
There you go.
The next horse, Rachel's Valentina. Now, I think she's probably going to go off favored. I have mixed emotions about that Ashland Stakes. She was very game. Obviously, that was the plan. I mean, literally, I was shocked that they waited and they thought they could just run that well off the layoff. Part of me says, is there a chance of a bounce? Because I just thought she was, I mean, before Weep No More came on the scene, I mean, she tried hard, and she was going to beat Catherine Sophia. Can she bounce back and go a longer distance and really just, she could go either way, but I think she might be favored because of the name and the connections.
Oh, I think she will be favored for exactly those reasons. The name, connections, people will think Rachel Alexandra, all of it, and I tend to kind of agree with you on this one. Like, she certainly has showed talent, but she's never put in a performance like she did in the Ashland, and it was just like you say, it was such a gritty game performance that I'm inclined to believe that she's going to bounce off of that. I mean, to come off the long layoff, throw down a run like that, now you're going to ask her to stretch her out and run against the best group for life. I mean, when you're talking final preps, you tend to want an easier one, you kind of ease your way into it. To have such a hard race, it's going to be extremely difficult, I think, for her to back that up with another top-class performance.
Well, and the thing of it is, too, is now Catherine Sophia's back in the race. I think you could make, I mean, she's got to face the same horse, probably duel with her again. Maybe not as much of a duel because it's a bigger field, so she doesn't have to do all the dirty work, plus go a longer distance. The talent and the pedigree is there, so I suppose you probably got to take a long look at her. But if you really want, if you kind of believe, if you visually, it just looked like that race took a lot out of her. I do think she's going to be favored. Yeah, it's kind of a tough call on her.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that you keep in mind of, though. I mean, you and I, when you watch races and they finish and you see the horse go over to the winner's circle. You know, sometimes they're bouncing up and down. They don't look like they've run. They like they go another lap. She looked tired, so tired. I mean, she's one who I have no problem betting against.
Royal Obsession, she has a great pedigree. Tap It Out of Tiz now. And this is a horse that ran to Lewis Bay. She lost to Venus Valentine. You know, she only had one race as a 2-year-old. So, you know, she's kind of like Creator in a way that, you know, she's just grinding away, grinding and grinding away. She may have a little bit more upside. I'm not sure that she's going to reach her ultimate peak in the Oaks, but I don't think she's a toss yet either.
Probably not a toss, but she's one who I think I've been disappointed by. I've expected a lot more from her, probably because of her breeding and because of the connections, and she just hasn't been able to put it all together. Oh, my gut tells me she's just not fast enough.
You know, the one thing with her, you know, she's had 2 6-horse fields. Now she gets a 14-horse field, and I think that makes a difference with some of these horses. So I think, you know, right now she's kind of in that 7th, 8th spot, and she's a question mark for me. You know, maybe not a win contender, but maybe somebody to include 3rd or 4th. Dream Dance, she looks like she fits with these. I mean, she's ran in a lot of grade 1s and grade 2s. You can't say that they've ducked any of the big races. Look at all, I mean, Fairgrounds Oaks, Goldenrod, Alcibiades, Pocahontas. I mean, she seems to run in all the graded stakes.
Yeah, no, she definitely runs, you know, against the big girls in every race. And I mean, I thought that her run behind Landover Sea was good enough, and I rate Landover Sea highly enough that, you know, for me, I think she's one that you have to definitely take seriously. You know, not on the win end, but underneath. She's one of these horses I think could get in there, 3rd, start off the layoff, and kind of really jack up the prices of your tries.
Now, the next horse kind of surprised me. This is one where I think, you know, people always talk about Derby fever. I think we may have a case of Oaks fever here. I think Nickname has proven that on a dry surface, 9 furlongs is not going to be her game. First, when Songbird was going to the Oaks, they said they were going to definitely run in the 8 Bells, and then now she's back under consideration for the Oaks. I just don't think this filly wants to go 9 furlongs on a dry track.
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, I think that she earned her spot here, and you can see, you know, that she deserves to be here. But is this the best spot for her distance-wise? I'm probably not.
Taxable ran a strong race the last time. Only 2 preps this year. This will be 3rd off a layoff. Ran a huge race at Churchill Downs over the track last fall, won by 7, a broker maiden. I think this is a nice-looking horse.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, if you like Taxable, then I think that depends on what you feel about Terra Promessa. And, you know, for me, because I think Terra Promessa did so much wrong in that race and still beat her, then I'm kind of inclined to think that Terra Promessa has Taxable's measure. So that in and of itself, unless you think that they're so good that they could run 1-2, I'm kind of inclined to just kind of let Taxable go here.
I don't know. I thought Taxable ran crooked the whole stretch. I thought she would have won the race if she would have ran in a straight line. I like Taxable a lot more than Terra Promessa.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm not sure you have to use both, but I think Taxable legitimately might be 3 lengths better than Terra Promessa. So for me, she's a top 6 contender.
Okay.
Just that last race, she ran very crooked. If they'd have had Trackus, they would have had her running 12 more feet than Terra Promessa just down the stretch.
Yeah.
She went every which way but straight down the stretch, and the jockey kept on trying to get her straight, and it wasn't anything physical. It was just like she was goofy, so I guess she was just being a tappet. But I think there's some talent here, and with only 3 lifetime starts and one of them at 6 furlongs, there's still some upside on this horse.
Well, and that's the thing that she has in her favor, is that she is so lightly raced. She is eligible for that improvement. So if she is one who's on your radar, you know, she's one of very few in here who you legitimately can say this horse can take a step forward.
Paola Queen, you know, she looked kind of beaten on the turn in the Go Maggie Go race, but there's some pedigree here, and at least she seems to be in shape. And you know, she's had 3-4 races this year, same connections as Majesto that's running in the Derby, and it just kind of took them a while to break their maiden, but then went right into the graded company just because their form lines held. So she's a long shot. She's not one of my top 5 contenders, but I don't think she's the worst horse in the race.
No, definitely not the worst in a race like this, I would say. As you say, there is some breeding there that is helpful on our side. And, I didn't mind her maiden breaker at all. I mean, this is obviously a big step up from that. But, she is one who, there's some interesting side there. I thought that her second in the Gulfstream Park Oaks was pretty nice. It wasn't that bad at all. So, I guess for me with her, to like her, I think maybe it makes it tough for me to really pick her, not because of the time it took her to break her maiden or the fact that she finished second in the Gulfstream Park Oaks, but maybe more so her breeding. I mean, it's just hard for me to legitimately see a daughter, a flatter, improving, I guess, for this stretch out.
Catherine Sophia, 4 for 5 lifetime, but the key thing is that her one loss was the last race, and that took a lot of luster off this horse. Kind of, I thought this was kind of the same thing as off the tracks here. That Laurel and that Parks, those were 2 nice wins. Yeah, she rolled off a couple of wins, but she's by Street Boss out of Mineshaft. I'm not sure that screams 9 furlongs either.
It doesn't, but, at the same time, it wasn't like she was making some monumental stretch out here. I mean, she had been running 1-turn miles, and then she ran a mile on the 16th in the Ashland. I mean, it's just hard for me to believe that you can take a horse and that's just undefeated at 1-turn miles, put them over a mile on the 16th, and they just die in the stretch. I mean, that's really hard for me to believe. With her, it's one of those cases that you and I have talked about before, of that almost she ran so bad that I'm just going to draw a line through it. I mean, it was that bad. I mean, to go from everything we've seen of her to that kind of a race, I'm willing to completely forgive it because it was so bad. I just can't even believe it to be true.
Then another horse, Carino Mia. Now, this horse ran in the Ashland, and I think a lot of people are going to say, well, she was beat by Weep No More and Rachel's Valentina and Catherine Sophia, but she was part of the quarantine, and I just don't think Maud had her completely cranked up like Rachel's Valentina was. She's had a nice workout the other day. This horse may be the overlooked horse from the Ashland. To me, she's a contender just because of that speed, and I think that quarantine, they originally wanted 2 preps, and they just couldn't get them in because they were quarantined.
Right, as you say, she was affected by that Payson Park quarantine. She was meant to have another start before that, and they couldn't get it in because she couldn't go anywhere. I can definitely see where you would think that, and she's one who's definitely on my short list for that same reason. I mean, it's a little bit like the Catherine Sophia line, that she ran so bad that I just really can't even believe it to be true. And if you look at the pedigree, her pedigree compared to Catherine Sophia certainly is more inclined to routing. I think that she's one definitely with a shot, because you have to take all the considerations into hand that, these horses come in here with plans, and when there is a change to the plan, then maybe you have to be a little bit more forgiving in spots, because, like you say, this was meant to be second start, and instead it was the first start off the break, and she looked like she desperately needed the raise.
So how do you kind of see the pace? Do you think it's going to be contested? Is it going to be Catherine Sophia and Carino Mia kind of going for the lead? Where do you see some of your early handicapping? Still got the post position to come, but at least we know who the horses are going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely, the post is going to make it more of a say in here than we're used to in the Oaks, just because of the larger field. But as you say, I see Catherine Sophia, Carino Mia. I see, Terra Promessa not being too far off them, if not right up there with them as well. There definitely is some speed in here, but I don't see them going, lethally fast. I mean, to me, this is a race where you're going to get, a very true pace scenario, I think, in that you're going to get, a race where no matter your running style, if you're not caught wide, you're in with a chance.
And then it sounds like you're still, Lewis Bay and Landover Sea, you think they can sit off the pocket trip and maybe get first run and go maybe go possibly as well.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how you'd see it. So you'll have them go first run, and then you'll have kind of your more mid-pack and deep closers who will be coming on later. And I really do think this is the type of race, though, where you have kind of every group. You have your front runners, you have your pressers, mid-packers, closers, and pretty much everyone's going to be in with a chance. And you love races like that from a betting perspective, I think, because it really gives you a lot of options.
So right now, do you anticipate using more horses in the Oaks or more horses in the Derby in your Oaks Derby double?
I think definitely more horses in the Oaks. I mean, the Derby for me, it's going to be pretty small. I think, if I can use, I think what I would say is if I could use Nyquist in the Derby and play a few longer shots in here on one ticket, and then have another ticket where I'll have a couple, I'll allow a couple more of the shorter prices and then put them all to Dancing Candy, then that'd be kind of the way I'm looking at it. So I use both Dancing Candy and Nyquist, but on two separate tickets with two different scenarios of horses here in the Oaks, because I do consider this a very, very wide open race.
And then do you think, is the Oaks a type of race where it's pretty contentious and you have to maybe do some boxing or keel horse up and down, or is it the type of race where you're trying to find that sneaky horse for third and fourth, maybe to try to hit the trifecta?
I think for me, this is the type of race because I don't like Regis Valentina, and that's pretty much the one strong opinion I have, is that I want to beat her. These are usually the type of races then that I try to play in horizontals, because a lot of times, if you can have a race like this, pick a couple and beat that favorite, and somebody who's going to be, I think, a pretty decent favorite in here, heavy favorite, then that's when you can really get paid. So, usually races like this where, I don't have the strongest opinion on who's going to win, I just know that I don't like the favorite at all. Those are the kind of races that I really like to play in horizontal wagers.
Yeah, I think there's lots of, I think, my really opinion is I like Taxable better than more than Terra Promessa. And I kind of like Karina Mia a little more than Rachel Valentina. But I also I have to have Land Over Sea just because I like some of her. Those weren't clunk up seconds. I thought she actually ran fairly well against Songbird. You just have to ignore what Songbird was doing, and Land Over Sea wasn't clunking up. I thought she was actually running at the tail end of some of those races.
No, she was. I like her quite a bit. And like I said, I didn't think that, even if Songbird was in here, I wouldn't have minded playing Land Over Sea against her, because I just do think that tactically, the decision-making in her races against Songbird was not the wisest. I mean, I get that Songbird's a tricky horse to match up against tactically, but to, really kind of rush out of the gate, really rush all the way up to Songbird and then sit, maybe it's the worst thing you could do against her, and she still was in there finishing second every time. So I thought that, with maybe worst case scenario tactics, she still was really running well against Songbird, and that says a lot to me about Land Over Sea's talent. And if I had to say today, who's my top choice, it's definitely her. And it's really, she's probably the one horse in this race that I have a strong opinion of, that she's going to go close. Is she going to win? I don't know. But I think she's the one horse in this race, so I feel like I can reliably say, she's going to run really well here.
Yeah, and I also think, I don't know, for some reason I think Lewis Bay is better than her speed figures, but that doesn't mean I think she's necessarily going to win. But I think she got knocked a little bit in that Demoiselle, because I thought visually she did what she had to do. It was kind of a weak group, but not too often you see a 2-year-old circle the field 6 wide on the turn. She actually did it. And then, in that Gazelle, again, it was Mo Diamore and Royal Obsession, who's kind of disappointed. But again, I thought visually, she opened up by 3 and then kind of just galloped in. And it was a sloppy track. I mean, we saw other horses that day that didn't handle the slop. So it shows to me that maybe she's not fast, but she's got other talents that she can, at least she has a racehorse. She can run wide and she can run on slop, and she can win by 6 in a maiden race. I don't know. Those are skills too. I don't think you necessarily have to be this fast horse all the time.
No, probably not. But I mean, I wonder too if this is the horse that, the day comes, the the first look at the odds comes up and you're like, oh, this one's a lot shorter than I thought it was going to be. I mean, she just seems that horse that kind of is getting that buzz.
Yeah, no, she definitely. I mean, I see a bunch of 4-1 shots. I really don't see a horse under 3-1. I think Rachel's Valentino will be 3-1. Then you'll have Landover Sea and Lewis Bay at 7-2, and Terra Promessa at 5-1. I think a couple of these long bombs are going to be just that, because the way the board goes, I think Go Make It Go is the one that's going to sneak up to 15-1. I
Yes.
think Royal Obsession is going to sneak up to 15 to 18-1. And I think Taxable is going to sneak up to 15 to 18-1. So to me, and even Karina Mia could go up to 10 to 12-1. So, I mean, if you have those 4 lower price horses, they're taking up 70% of that pool. Some of the other ones have to go off double digits and closer to 15 to 18-1. So,
Yes.
the thing is, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win, but you can kind of throw them in the trifecta mix.
Oh, not even just that. I mean, those are the types that I would love to use on a pick 3 with a horse like Nyquist, because I mean, I think highly of Nyquist in the Derby, and you have to think, of the 2 races, it helps that I don't like Rachel's Valentina at all, but in the 2 races, just in general, if you're looking at usable favorite, I mean, the usable favorite in a 20 horse field is always going to be better than in a smaller field like you have here in the Oaks. I mean, even if it doesn't seem that way, I think people look at Nyquist as this crazy heavy favorite, but you have to remember that when you're looking at pick 3s, pick 4s, there's 19 other horses to choose from in that race. So I think inevitably, no matter what price he is in the win pool, that in the horizontals, he's not going to go off as high of a favorite as Rachel's Valentina is. So, these sorts of horses you're talking about now, your Mocats, your Dream Dances, your Royal Obsessions. I mean, these are ones who I would love to play in a pick 3 single to Nyquist at the end, because wow, if that hits, you're going to get paid, even though you ended up with the Derby favorite at the last leg.
Yeah, and I think that's part of just human nature. People like to be alive. So you're right. But on the other hand, the Derby's the marquee race. So I think instinctively people say like, oh, I want to play all these horses in the Oaks. But then they say, oh, but I want to have all these horses in the Derby because that's the big race. So I think you're right. Nyquist maybe 7-2 on the board, but nobody's going to single him. Everybody's going to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 deep on all those tickets because of the fear factor. And the fear factor, the top board don't lie. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, we've all, everybody thinks there's comfort in more horses, but that doesn't put them in front. We all see the stories where people have, 5 or 6 horses and the one horse you don't have wins. I mean,
yes,
either Nyquist is going to win or not going to win, and you might as well take advantage of maybe getting 6-1 in a double or a pick 3 on them.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, I think that's where, for me, in these sorts of wagers, tracking like this, this pick 3, if you have like the Oaks, Woodford Reserve, Derby pick 3, or if you, I think in that sort of a wager, then it allows you to hit. And you don't necessarily have to get the race right, if you get me. I mean, you don't have to like pick out the winner out of 20. You have all these people, and you kind of said it's like, oh, it's the Derby, pick a horse. But like, for me, my opinion in the Derby is that they aren't going to go extremely fast. And so I'm left with a few horses. One of them is Nyquist. One of them is Dancing Candy. Probably the other one is Outwork, but I haven't decided if I'm going to do anything on that end yet. But with the other 2, there's a lot you could work with on that. As far as this pick 3 goes, using a couple long shots to Nyquist, and then using, maybe you can allow for a larger ticket to Dancing Candy because he's going to be a very large price in the Derby. But, so you can hit that and not have been like, oh, I knew this horse was going to win the Derby, and still have a really good day.
Well, yeah, and my theory on that is play a $10 ticket with the horse you like, and then play $1 tickets with the other horses.
Exactly.
But my other theory is, you know what? Too many people think this is truly a 20-horse race. I'm sorry. Oscar Nominated and Trojan Nation are not going to win. And every dollar that's on those 2 horses in a double or a pick 3 is just stupid money. So I think that's my bigger point, is that people pretend like they'll wheel. And I'm like, no. I mean, if Oscar Nominated wins the Derby, like, you just walk away. Like, or Trojan Nation. Like, I'm not saying they can't win. I'm just saying, what's the point in playing a horse like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same even for maybe like Lonnie. I'd put in that boat as well. I mean, it's just, you have to, even though it's a 20 horse race and people try to pretend like, oh, it's wide open. I mean, there's definitely a few horses that on paper have no shot. And if they beat you, well, then they beat you. I mean, I don't handicap the Derby any different than I handicap any other race. And that's why for me, I end up being able to narrow it down to just a few horses, because that's typically how I handicap races to begin with. I mean, you start off with the pace, and what do you think pace wise? Do you think they're going to go very fast? Do you think they're going to go very slow? Do you think it'll be somewhere in the middle? And that by itself should get you to be able to axe about half the field. So how, people end up with these ginormous tickets with, 12, 15 horses, I don't know.
Yeah, like I say, there's contenders, and then to me there's those outsiders. And if two outsiders beat me, then that's just life. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like getting hit by a bus. I mean,
Well, I mean, it's
it
like
can
any
be.
other race. Think of how many races that you'll see this huge bomb win, and you'll look back at your past performances, and you're just like, that wasn't, handicapable. That was just, that just happened. But like, especially younger horses, at times you look at the past performances, and it's like there literally was nothing here to like about this horse. If it beats me, then it beats me, and you move on. I mean, I wouldn't go saying, start using more and more horses in the Derby because you think, oh, maybe this one could win if this and this and this and this and this happen. I mean, that's, you're getting yourself into a dangerous position there. I'd be much more inclined to really narrow it down. Who are the few horses you like, and play that wager, 5 times instead of using 5 times that number of horses.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people the fear factor really does kind of override, and I think it overrides the experienced horse bettors more than the rookies. The rookies just play 2 times 2. It seems like the experienced bettors are the ones that go 10 times 8.
Yeah, I mean, like I say again, that's where you get into really tricky waters. Is you've got to have an opinion somewhere. I mean, for me, even we talked about the Derby a little bit last week, and I was saying, I would have, we have to see the draw, but at this point, if he drew all right, I really wouldn't have a huge problem just kind of, wheeling around Nyquist and taking 5 horses on top, put Nyquist second, put Nyquist third, and then put Nyquist on top and tries, and just, let's see what happens. But like, to me, that's my one strong opinion, is that Nyquist is going to run really well. So you try to, formulate a bet around your strong opinion and try to cash off of that. I mean, fine, he's the favorite and he's going to be a really heavy favorite. But if he finishes second and someone at 20 to 1, Dancing Candy wins, who I'll have on top for sure in that wheel, well then, there's a possibility of making a lot of money off of just having that opinion that Nyquist is going to run well instead of trying to beat the favorite everywhere.
And you can know that if Oscar nominated wins, Ken Ramsey will probably buy everybody at the track a drink anyway. So you won't leave thirsty.
No, you won't leave sad. He'll perk you up.
So yeah, Ken Ramsey's not gonna. If he wins that with Oscar nominated, I think the entire 100,000 will get a free drink from Ken Ramsey.
Absolutely, it'll be a big party down there.
It will be a big party. So you really don't lose even if Oscar nominated wins. So, but yeah, like I say, I think sometimes too is this. I mean, there's a difference between liking 1, 2, maybe 4 or 5 horses, but this theory that all 20 horses can win this race, I just think
no,
that's just not a way to go into a race like that. I mean, I just think, yeah, I mean, theoretically anyone in the gate can win, but if you're truly trying to bet that angle, it can get expensive in a hurry.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and it's how you use your wagers. I mean, obviously, if you're playing a try, then you're going to use more horses in your try, because now you're trying to see who's going to get first, second, and third. Okay, that doesn't mean that when you play a pick 3 or pick 4, you should take all those horses used in your try and put them in your pick 4 and use all of them, because, the fact of the matter is, and this is true for any race, that there's a lot more horses who have the potential to finish in the top 3 than there are who have the potential to win. Usually in a race, and that counts the Derby, really only a handful of horses have a legitimate chance to win.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Derby has a bigger field, so you have to kind of expand that a little bit. But like you say, normally I take half the field. If it's an 8-horse field, I think 4 of them can win. If it's a 10-horse field, I think 5 can win. In the Derby, it's a 20-horse field. I think 8 or 9, maybe 10 can win, but I don't think 20 of them can win. From a
and you
weight
see that down the lane. I mean, think of how many derbies that you can think of in your lifetime that like the margin of victory was actually close. I mean, that's the thing, is that at the end of the day, there's usually a couple standouts, and maybe they don't always win, but they, for the most part, usually go pretty well. And usually somebody wins it by, 2-3 lengths. It's not like usually that's, it's really made out to be this really contentious race everywhere. And it's not like, most years you see 3 horses duking it out down the lane and where they win by nose or something. It usually doesn't end up actually being that contentious of a race.
And you know what? The Oaks plays out the same way. I mean, going into this race, we may like 5, 4, 7 contenders, but down the stretch, I'll bet you halfway down the stretch, you could say it's either going to be this horse or 3 contenders tops.
Yeah, no, exactly. And
4 or 5 of these horses will be backing up going into the turn in the Oaks. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yes, no, that's exactly how it is. And, that's why, I think even if anything, these are races where if you can come up with a strong opinion and say, you know what, I really like this horse or 2, and work your way around it with some long shots. I mean, that is how you get paid in these races. Try to kind of zig where everyone else zags. If it's a race of the Derby where you think everyone else is going to use 10 horses, well then, try to maybe only use 2 or 3 that you really think strongly about. And you know what? If you get to one of these races, the Oaks or the Derby, and you just think, I have no clue at all, well then, I mean, there's no harm in passing. I get that it's a Derby, and maybe you want to have $2 on somebody for fun, for interest, but aside from that, if you don't have a strong opinion, I mean, the Derby is a race that can get extremely expensive very quickly, and there's, these cards, both Friday and Saturday, are such great cards. There's no harm in looking elsewhere as well.
Yeah, the Derby doesn't have to be, to me, the 2 days just means there's a lot of chances to take swings. That's why to me you double up your bankroll. That doesn't necessarily mean you blow it all on the Derby and the Oaks. It just means you've got 14 stakes races, and you've got a lot of money, and you got a lot of people, and maybe you can find somewhere on those 2 days where to take a swing. I still think it's a day or 2 that you got to take a swing, but a swing to me means you just, like I say, if somewhere along the line you play a ticket that can win you some money.
No, that's exactly it.
It doesn't mean it's going to happen. I'm just saying somewhere along the day I'll do a $20 double. I'm not saying at all it's going to win. I'm just saying I'm going to play a $20 double somewhere along the line because I want to hit one. It's one of those days where you have a chance, and the money gets, and when I say a $20 double, sometimes that's a second favorite with a favorite, and that pays $54. And, on a normal day at Belmont, that might pay, $14.
Exactly. And that is why, it's really great to have a days like this and these big days, and why you got to really pick your spots there.
All right, looking forward to it. Next week, we're going to come back. We're going to be, we'll have the post position, so we'll take a look, final picks for the Kentucky Oaks, the Kentucky Derby, the Woodford Reserve. We'll throw out a couple of final Oaks Derby double tickets and suggested plays, and then let everybody get back to capping and hopefully picking some winners. That's going to do it for another edition of Down to the Wire.